As soon as a man awakens for a moment and opens his eyes, all the forces that caused him to fall asleep begin to act upon him with tenfold energy, and he immediately falls asleep again, very often dreaming that he is awake or is awakening.
In the tutorial on knowledge and being, we followed Prince Siddhartha's early development, his auspicious conception and birth, the prophecy that he would become a great monarch or an enlightened Buddha, his father's decision to effect the former by confining him to a luxurious palace, his venturing out beyond the palace walls, his unexpected encounters with old age, sickness, and death, and his eventual decision to leave his father's kingdom. This final decision to leave is known as the Great Departure. Since it concludes Siddhartha's realization of his illusory upbringing, it symbolizes the first step of the B pyramid, the step of realization. Siddhartha is shown crossing the city gates on horseback, the muzzle of his horse emerging out of the two-dimensional plane of his old world into a new dimension. In this delicate transition, as Siddhartha is on the cusp of the new, he is greeted by Mara.
At that moment, Mara came with the intention of stopping Siddhartha. "Go not forth, sir. In 7 days from now the treasure wheel will appear, and will make you sovereign over the 4 continents and the 2,000 adjacent isles. Stop, O my lord."
As long as Siddhartha is happily confined to his luxurious palace, Mara doesn't bother to tempt him. But once Siddhartha takes a firm step towards liberation, Mara approaches in person. The word Mara originates from Sanskrit and means causing death. Death, in this respect, is the death of our higher part, the higher self, mentioned in the previous tutorial. Mara tempts Siddhartha, just as the Genesis serpent tempts Adam and Eve. Like the serpent, Mara uses subtlety. He lists the earthly riches that Siddhartha is about to foolishly renounce. These could come to him very soon, if only he held on to his princely title and stayed within the confines of his father's palace. The lesson of this episode is in its timing. Mara appears only when Siddhartha renounces earthly riches. The serpent appears only when God commands to avoid the forbidden fruit. This subtle, deceiving element appears only when our higher part formulates an aim, teaching us that the efforts of the higher self evoke resistance from the lower self. Aims attract deviation.
The moment you start self-observation, something in you starts imagination. And self-observation, if you really try it, is a constant struggle with imagination.
This lesson bears 3 practical consequences for our work. First, it teaches us to expect our habits to strengthen as a result of our efforts to control them. Second, it teaches us that deviation is reliable, and therefore that it can be anticipated. And third, it teaches us that deviation never appears under its own guise, but always approaches with subtlety. These 3 aspects of internal opposition lend more importance to self-observation and self-study. In order to prolong our efforts to be, we must learn which habits to observe, anticipate, and detect, which brings us to this week's exercise. To verify that our aims attract deviation. For this end, while making efforts to be, we will have to pay special attention to the timing and character of our internal opposition. What happens when we try to stop daydreaming, to slow down our haste, or to avoid the expression of negativity? If we observe that our internal reaction to these efforts doesn't appear by accident, but as a result of our effort itself, then we have verified that there is a mind behind the unconscious functioning of our cosmos. We have verified our lower self. Having suffered too much of his illusory palatial life, Siddhartha refuses Mara's temptation. "It is not sovereignty that I desire," he replies. "I shall become a Buddha."
Then the tempter, Mara, followed him, ever watching for some slip, as closely as a shadow that never leaves its object.